So y'all remember the video I did not too long ago about me talking about some of the best waifus from different universes and just how good those are and what are the best ones? Well, there's one thing I need to clarify about that whole video. One is essentially that the worlds I was talking about in that one wasn't really like the top worlds I think are like absolutely the best of everything, right? And the big clarification is because a lot of people was talking about in the comments like, oh, you think that's like the best ones and all that type of stuff? And I'm like, not really. I was just kind of listing some out there just because I'm like, yeah, if you were in a whole, world of those characters, or basically you just looked at them as a whole, you would probably maybe sit here and agree that, yeah, there are some pretty good characters that's out there. That being said, if I said, oh, those are the best verses where waifu characters exist, absolutely not. I could not ever really just say that and just say, yeah, that's the peak option right there, because no, it is not. If I had to be absolutely honest with you, Genshin does exist, yes, so that will be one, but I don't think Ruby and DXC make it that list. I think Danganronpa takes it, and I think Naruto takes it, if I'm gonna be real with you. And one of those things that we're gonna focus on today is absolutely going to be Naruto, because before you had MHA come through all the fine women and all the content galore when it comes to Gensai material ever, Naruto carried that bag for Shonen for a while. Like, there wasn't a time where people wasn't bringing up Naruto characters a lot of the time and which ones we wanted to clap. Honestly, I feel like people forget that Naruto literally has like a fat H legacy when it comes down to, especially if you look at some of the sites that existed back then and some of the sites that still kind of exist now, like Naruto Pix or Naruto Bomb or things of sort like that. Like, there was a ton of sites that existed mainly and solely for Naruto related content, and you could basically go out your way to pick out anything that you want and you eating pretty good. And I'll even arguably say that the doujin side of really a lot of shonen stuff, Naruto has the best doujin stuff out of the entirety of just doujins in general, right? Because there's a lot of doujins that absolutely just suck ass. There's a lot of them that doesn't necessarily hit good for certain series, but for Naruto, I've seen more bangers than failures, if I'm gonna be absolutely honest. So, in terms of the Gensai sort of sense, Naruto, when it comes to women, it's a pretty good time, and it also helps that the show is, itself pretty damn good. Like, if you haven't seen Naruto, especially part 1 Naruto, you kind of should go out and watch it because it's still really damn good. That being said, when it comes to its female characters, I can't say the same thing, because yes, you do get ones that do actually matter, you do get ones that actually do feel like there is some effort put into them, but then there's some that just does not. And by some, I do mean a fat majority of women in that show does not necessarily feel like they're all really overly important at all, and it kind of sucks. Like, I'm not even gonna lie, when I was watching Naruto as a kid, I really wasn't watching Naruto for like, what the women were gonna do. I was there kind of just to see how the plot progresses and all that type of stuff, and anytime they're on screen, I'm just like, alright, what goofy shit are we gonna get into today? And that's really about it, right? Because most of the time my brain is like, dang, Hinata looks pretty good, we like to clap, and that's essentially about it. Like, if you're not gonna remember anything lore-wise about each of these characters, you're gonna definitely remember how you felt when you're getting hard, and that's essentially just how the story kind of goes of their whole life and existence of Naruto. Also, it really doesn't help Naruto's case when they have like the worst written women of all time. Like, I'm not necessarily gonna sit here and lie. Yes, some of the female characters does have plot importance, but that doesn't mean just because a character has plot importance doesn't mean that they're written well, so that's just kind of how it is. Like, there was moments where Tsunade had plot importance, there was moments where Hinata had it, but overall in the story, would you say they're really well written? Not necessarily, at least not in my eyes when it came down to it, and funny enough, I would say Hinata kind of had a downgrade in Shippuden to a point, because I feel like in part 1 Naruto, she kind of hit way harder than what she did in like Shippuden, outside like what, that one pain moment, and then her being quiet for most of the time until like the war where she slapped Naruto. Oh great, big moment, right? And that's kind of, again, all that you feel for a majority of the cast, right? Because you do get some characters that are just absolutely good and goated, but then they don't really do anything past like a few extra bits, and it kind of sucks. I'm not necessarily gonna sit here and lie. Now, I know somebody could easily say, well, Shonen just terrible at writing women characters. That's why MHA sucks. That's why Dragon Ball can suck at that. But not really, and I wouldn't even put those two near Naruto's writing of female characters. Because let's just be honest, MHA, yes, you could probably say it's just close to the level of Naruto, but at least it doesn't give you the full effing circle of a character constantly nagging for another character because they need them in their life for a love interest type of thing. But when it comes down to Ochako and Toga, it felt like there was something more to it, right? And then because it's also related to, Toga's power, her quirk, and how it affects her emotionally and mentally and all that type of stuff, and overall how much different of depth of their character kind of went, it feels a bit newer, or at least a bit fresher than what Sakura was trying to do. And even if you don't necessarily like that plot point, it still was something a bit more. Plus, I'm not gonna lie, I feel like the women in MHA get way more active than Naruto does, right? Like, yeah, you get Tsunade here, you get Conan there at times, you get like a few instances, but I feel like you get more impactful things from the women of that show of MHA than Naruto does, because Midnight's death still is something I'm like, yeah, that she didn't deserve to get taken out like that. She didn't deserve that. Same way with, Murako. She basically is out here whooping mad ass, losing all her limbs, and yet she's still a peak of shit. Then you get someone like, I forgot the name of the person, but she was basically like, the American lady that died to Shigaraki. Like, she was getting active. She was super good, right? So it's kind of like you can't put them in the same boat. And that's for Dragon Ball to be put down. Dragon Ball, honestly, at one point I was gonna say, yeah, their characters does not matter, honestly, when it comes down to the female aspect. But then in comes Android 21, and then in comes Khalifa and Kale and Kefla, and then immediately I'm like, oh, okay, so they're a bit better, honestly. So I'm not necessarily gonna sit here and just say, oh, they're both on the same level as Naruto, because no, that just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And there has been many discussions and many debates on how Naruto female characters are in terms of writing, and how like people can basically bring up like the gender roles of the characters and stuff like that, and how it kind of goes and things of the sort like that. But I'm not necessarily gonna sit here and do that because I don't feel like yapping about that. Honestly, I'm just here to yap about how fine these hoes is, and that's kind of basically how it is, while also giving my 2 cents on things. And really, and I'm not gonna lie, I kind of view Naruto, or at least in the characters of the female side, I would definitely view them as more beat meat material than, oh, I just genuinely care about the characters and their story and everything, because they don't really have much of a story for the most part, outside of maybe like one or two, but that's barely about it, right? And that's just kind of how it goes, So overall, I'm like really sitting here remembering Naruto for just how fine the females was, and why would I clap, and all that type of stuff. But at the end of the day, that's kind of really, for me personally, all they kind of got going. They have good designs, they have good peakness at moments, but not really anything to sit here and write home about. That just kind of is the unfortunate fact about Naruto. And then some of the designs feel like upgrades, and some of the designs feel like downgrades, depending on which part you're watching. Like, for example, just quickly, Ino, she looks mad good in part 2. I didn't care for any other version of Ino. And then for really just to kind of add more into it, Tenten. Everybody clowns on Tenten, but at the same time, I like her more in Boruto with her design than the other ones. That being said, Tenten can still get it in the part 2 version, but still, it just like, a lot of characters feel like they're getting downgrades at times and things of sort of like that. Hell, even Sarada has a downgrade with her time skip. No one cares for that shit. Why did you change up something so good? Why did you change up the mix of something so good that Sarada had, only for you to downgrade her later? I don't understand that. That was some actual nonsense. Her design was fine the way it was. Could have just kept it that way. But regardless, if we're gonna talk about which cheeks you're gonna dive into, definitely anybody from Naruto is 100% valid, at least for the most part. So, there is definitely that. And I would honestly give the scale of clappability of Naruto characters like a fat ass 10, right? Because again, they were feeding the streets when it come down to Gentai content. There ain't no way I couldn't do it. So there is that. But anyway, that is essentially all I got to say for this one. So hopefully you did enjoy. If you did, be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the bell notification everywhere else. Also follow me on socials, and if you'd like to donate to the channel, Kofi and Cash App is available as well. And until then, it's your boy Jay, signing off. Have a blessed day.